what are some of like the leadership traits that you're seeing that define some of the most successful retail executives out there? And what is going to be needed in the next 5 years from now?
Curiosity, everyone speaks about, it's a word everyone uses, but I rarely see it in authentic action from leaders. I think that there still is this, what you know what worked. This is what has delivered great results. Instead of saying, forget our own business, let's be highly curious about not only our industry, but other industries. What can we learn from the hotel business? What can we learn from the restaurant business? What can we learn even within, you say, contemporary versus luxury versus off-price versus big box? How they operate doesn't apply to you. But the reality is there's a lot that applies. So I do think that level of curiosity is one that will differentiate great leaders from others in the future. And I would also apply that to technology. I still see leaders coming to me and say, well, I don't really understand ChatGPT yet. I'm like, we've moved past that. If that's where you are, you're already late. There's a new technology that I'm engaging with and learning about that's a listening device for employees. And that's really never been done at scale, of like listening to your shifts and then providing feedback for you on your selling skills based on how it's listening to you engage with people all week, creating almost like a weekly summary of these are things you did really well. These are your opportunities. Here's some coaching that could go with it. Here's how your supervisor could help you. So, learning say, well, how do we continue to provide feedback at scale? Here's just new technology being developed. So that technology curiosity applies to business. It applies to people learning what they want. It applies to other industries. For me, it just never stops. And that's what great leaders do.
Welcome back to another episode of the Innovate on Purpose podcast.
Hosted by Matt Mueller,
best-selling author of The Mindful Innovator and Rethink Retail's top retail expert.
We help retail leaders find clarity so they can grow their businesses purposefully.
We will uncover mindful tips, innovative solutions, and purposeful leadership advice and strategies that you can apply immediately to your retail innovation.
Are you ready to innovate on purpose?
Hey, before we jump into the episode today, I just wanted to say thank you for hitting the play button. You being here fires me up, and I cannot wait to share with you the insights that are going to make a difference in your business. Do me a favor, hit the subscribe button and leave a review so I can reach as many retail leaders as possible. They too need to hear this. Okay, let's do it. Hello and welcome to Innovate on Purpose, where we discuss all things innovation in retail. And today we are having a very, very awesome conversation that I've been looking forward to having for quite some time with Ron Thurston, no other than Ron Thurston, who I've known now for, 5 years we've known each other.
It was 2020.
My gosh, it's crazy. Your book just launched, Retail Pride. I remember I was sitting in the boardroom at Boar's Head, where we just launched this crazy transformation project in the retail industry. And you wrote the book. We had a great conversation. I wanted to do the same thing, following into your footsteps. And the one thing that I'll never forget is just the first page of your book, dedicating it to your grandfather, Oscar. Because my grandfather is also Oscar, and we were just connected on that.
I knew that, Matt. I didn't remember that particular nugget. That's interesting.
Yeah, that was like so cool just to kind of see that, because like both influences in our lives, and it's like, oh, this is going to be just an awesome conversation. And 5 years later, we're still talking. So I didn't run
friends,
you off yet.
And follow each other in the work that we're doing.
Yeah,
same. It's been great to watch you as well. I think the other piece, and I remember that initial conversation, is, I came from a grocery store construction family.
Yes.
And, you were in that world. I think I understood your world. You understood the retail side of it. And while I didn't want to work in construction, part of, the joy of the grocery business is that it's a retail business at its
Yeah.
core. And that's probably where my love began.
Yeah, absolutely. And your love for retail has definitely shined through and everything that I see you doing on social media, every conversation we had, and especially in your first best-selling book, Retail Pride, which was just so powerful to me. I probably didn't have the same viewpoint as you on retail and kind of like because I was frustrated. I came from the retail stores. I was frustrated working there, and it was retail is a tough job. But the way that you talk about it, the way that you celebrate it is just so refreshing and so needed in our industry. We need to celebrate those frontline employees that are in our stores because they mean so much to our economy. They mean so much to our stores. They just mean so much because we interact with them almost every day of our lives.
We do. They play such an important role. You're right, economically, but from an employment standpoint, but more, I think, emotionally important is that the retail is that industry that connects the world. It doesn't
Yes.
require purchase. It doesn't require anything except walking in as a stranger. And the gift and the skills that it takes to connect with strangers all day, every day, whether you're in a deli counter, whether you're in a luxury boutique, the skills are so incredibly valuable and often so self-taught. And it's really celebrating the fact that this is a self-taught industry that thrives on great leadership and the need to continue to develop these people. And I think we're reaching, in many ways, a kind of a critical breaking point here, where I think the employee base, the employee expectations are shifting generationally, and the expectations are going up of what leadership needs to do. And so I do think we have serious work to do to maintain that same momentum, but always celebrate that hard work, because you and I both know you go home at the end of a 12-hour shift, which is not uncommon, and you're
Yep.
exhausted from speaking to people all day.
Yeah,
But you're also
absolutely. Yeah.
motivated and like you're excited about the day. You just met all these people with all these interesting stories, but it's hard. It's hard work.
Yeah, and you help those people. It just that was like the most rewarding things, knowing I went home and was able to have an impact on someone's life, and just at least one little moment of joy, whether it was giving their kid a sample or just helping them solve a solution for the later in that day. It was just always like those were the things like yes, like we're helping people.
Agreed.
This yeah, Retail Pride, which is the first book. Now 2025, 5 years later, you have book number two, and now a two-time best-selling author of now the book Human Pride, which love the title. And it feels like it weaves perfectly and it kind of just builds on top of Retail Pride. Can you just tell us a little bit about what is like Human Pride about?
Yeah, I'd love to. So I think, Matt, you and I attend a lot of the big retail conferences, the NRFs and Shop Talks and some of the others. And what I noticed over the last couple of years is there's so much conversation about AI and AI's shift and AI's impact on the workforce. And it had continued to ramp up and ramp up. And my conversations in Retail Pride were always about people. But what I recognized is that we really, as a global human race, have such a need today to talk about optimizing our own human potential in both in retail, but in every industry. And so the ideas here just continue to say, well, how do we understand how technology is influencing all of our work? How does it, two things about the book. One, it's divided into three parts. One is for the job seeker, because AI has dramatically shifted the job search.
Yeah.
Two is for the leader, because similarly, technology and changes in the workforce have changed what it means to lead today. And for yourself, the third part is for yourself. It's the shortest section, but in many ways, we have to work hard on ourselves to protect our own kind of optimization when it comes to technology. Excuse me. And some of that is putting it down. Some of it is walking away. Some of it is how do I create efficiencies? Some of it is improving your work, or maybe it's your job application process. But it's important to note that we have to recognize how the world is changing, but it's also important to recognize that the only thing you can really control is yourself, and optimizing your own human potential, and say, well, what is my role in the future? How will my work change? How will my career, as I'm just graduating college, as many people just did, thousands of people just did this month, what does the future of work look like for them? What does the job search look like for them? So I really put a lot of thought into, that this is much more of a kind of self-development conversation, self-awareness, more than like how to. You have to do the
Yeah.
work on yourself to understand how the world is changing.
Yeah, and I love the term, like, control the controllables. Like, those are the only things you can control, right? It's in your circle. What are those things that you can actually have an influence on? And that's so important. And I think, especially with all this technology, and I usually call it like the shiny object syndrome. Like, we see, like, this new AI tool, and we're like, oh, how is that going to impact our lives? And what can we do with that thing? And it's just like, well, don't worry about it too much. Let's just focus in on that inner circle. Like, what are the things that you could do right now, right here around you to develop yourself,
True.
right? Yeah.
It's true. I mean, think about the industry you came from in grocery. At its core, it hasn't really changed, in like 100 years.
Nope.
It's the same. But I love that about it. And so then how do you say, well, then how do we optimize this experience? And so is it through, apps, through any big brand? Is it through employee engagement? Is it through awareness? Is it through how we hire? What are the ways we use technology? But the business itself, we control it because we know how it operates. It hasn't really changed. And that, for
Yeah.
me, that's fun. And to say, let's not try to change it. Let's actually be self-aware enough to say, this really works. But the workforce has changed and the customer expectations have changed, but the business model is still the same.
Yeah.
It's added complexity to it, and that's optimizing the human potential in so many ways. That's what the core of human pride is really about.
Love it, Ron. So I want to like dig into the leadership component of this, like and thinking about all this change that we're seeing in every industry and even in grocery. Like, there is like, transformation that is coming. Like, what are like the conversations like that are being overlooked right now with leaders?
So I think that one of them, Matt, is that the workforce has become much more multi-generational. And I speak specifically to retail, but often, this applies to, I would probably say, every industry. There are many situations where you have 4 generations of people working in the same office, in the same store, same company. And I think what's missed is that leadership generationally is very different. I do think in retail, we come from this world of like one size fits all, and we do reviews the same way, and we hire the same way, and we train the same way, and we expect the same thing, no matter if you have your first job and you're 17 or you're 60 years later at 77. Like I think we've had this mindset that everything has to be the same. And I think the most overlooked part of this conversation is that everyone requires a different leadership and potentially different process based on your expectations. And so then the missed part is then, well, what are those expectations? How do you discover what they are through each employee of how they want to be trained, how they want their career path to look like, how they want learning and development, ongoing learning and development? What does that look like? And it is very much not one size fits all. And that
Absolutely.
requires more work. It requires more effort, but the return on that is so phenomenal, because you and I both know one of the reasons people leave retail is because they don't see a clear career path to next. And so if you say, well, great, Matt, so what I've discovered through our touch bases is this is how you prefer your learning style to be. You prefer to read. You like to maybe, have more quiet time in the office to read through manuals and process things differently than someone that wants to watch videos, than someone that wants to go to a classroom session. We all learn differently. And so if you nail how people learn and want to experience work, how do you optimize them? Going back to human pride, how do you optimize their human potential? You do that through questions, and then give them what they've asked for and deliver on that as a leader. And there isn't, I think, a business that wouldn't benefit from a turnover perspective of putting a little more effort into that conversation.
Yeah, there's so much opportunity when you think about the turnover numbers that we face in retail, and it's crazy. It
It's unsustainable.
Yeah, it is. But it's like I almost laugh because like as you're talking about like the different questions that we need to ask and the different ways that we learn. Like yeah, like why aren't we doing that? Like we talk like about consumer trends and like one of the biggest consumer trends that we're seeing right now is personalization. People want personalization. Our employees are people. Why are we not personalizing the experience, especially if we want them to stay? So it's just it's almost like a no-brainer,
Right.
and it's definitely something we need to start thinking about more seriously and have those conversations.
Much more seriously. And
Absolutely.
to your point, it requires more effort on the company side to do that. And so if
Yeah.
you're balancing out, well, what's the current cost of hiring and training a new employee? Data shows it's somewhere between like 5,000. I've seen numbers upwards of $10,000 between posting, interviewing, onboarding, training. There are brands that I've spoken to that said, we're just trying to get them to stay for 30 days. If they stay for 30 days, then their likelihood of staying for 6 months exponentially gets better. I'm like, that's your goal, is to keep someone here for a month.
Yeah.
So, and they weren't doing a very good job at it. So if you did all the math and say, well, what does that cost? And what does it mean to invest in different training programs, different learning styles, different conversations? What's the return on that? There isn't a business that wouldn't say, you know what, I want to do things differently, or should do, or they will continue to get the same results. And we've seen this story before.
Yeah. So how does like a retailer start with that process? Because I'm sure they see, okay, yeah, we're spending this much money over here. How do you like get a retailer to say, okay, yes, I see the benefit and the ROI in going in this direction. I'm making it more personalized. Like, how do you get that commitment from a retailer?
Yeah. So it really begins with the hiring process. And so this is where I think we're reaching another breaking point where the feedback from younger generations of people on hiring processes are so bad. Like the surveys are so bad.
Yeah.
So you'd say, if we actually just did one thing as a company, let's choose one way we can improve the employee experience. It's actually before they even start. It's how they're hired. And
Mm-hmm.
so are you using AI to screen resumes? You probably are. How are you using different applicant tracking systems to screen resumes? What's that process look like? What's first interview process look like? There's a lot of brands moving to first interview via AI, and technology being built that can actually have conversations with you as a first interview, which sounds, for me, it sounds fun, but I'm not in a job search. But
Mm-hmm.
how does that as an employee? Like, is that the right thing to do for your brand? What does the second interview look like? How many interviews are required for entry level roles? And how long does it take? And then what's the job offer process? What's the onboarding process? Maybe there's a mentorship or buddy system built. So if you just fixed 5 of those things and really addressed it, there are a lot of surveys about new hires. How was your learning? How was your onboarding experience? How was your hiring experience? If you just fix that, they won't be looking for another job before they've even started, because that's what
Yes.
I'm hearing of, like, this was so bad, I'm just going to take it because
Mm-hmm.
I need some money while I look for something else.
Yep.
That's not sustainable in any
No.
business. And I think, just solve it before they even start, and you're winning.
I love that. So it's really understanding what is the employee journey from the first time that they see that there's an opening to the time that they're working for you. If you look at that journey and see what are all those touch points and how are you doing on each of them, how are you performing, I think that would be huge. And my son actually, 17 years old, he was getting out of food service. He wanted to go into retail, so he started looking at jobs at the outlets, and he experienced some really crazy starting points, and it's just like, okay, this assessment is really stupid. I don't understand what they're asking here. And one time he had to go into a Zoom call for a group interview, and he was in a waiting room for a half hour for someone to come up to pull him into the room to talk to him, and he wound up bailing on them. So it's just really poor experiences.
Really poor experience. And it's consistently bad. That's the part.
Yeah.
If you say, well, who's doing it really well? I could name a couple brands that I assume are doing it well. But I love when you said, like, personalization is, what does that mean from an employee standpoint? And are you really raising the bar high enough on the hiring journey so that when someone's like, wow, I just really loved like your process here. I loved the conversations I had, the professionalism, the timeliness. You're right. Like you don't have the Zoom glitches. Everything lined up really well. The likelihood of someone like your son staying in a brand that did that as his first job, or second job, it just continues to grow. And then they want to invest and say, well, you did the right thing hiring me. I want to do the right thing now as an employee, as a new employee. Like
Hmm.
that's pride. That's where pride begins. I'm proud to work here because of the experience I had when I was being hired. And
Yes,
just
exactly.
you've already instilled the lack of pride if you screwed that up along the way.
Yeah, absolutely. It's so important. And in fact, on the positive side of this, he wound up getting a job with Hurley, and he absolutely loves it. And he's sticking around for a while. He's like already said, like, I'm definitely going to be here. After during summer, which is he's going to summer break right now, but he's going to stay in his senior year. And the whole reason why is because he connected well with the employees there and the manager. The manager on his first interview went to the Starbucks with him and got a cup of coffee and sat down with him and had just a human conversation.
Nice.
And it just
Nice.
created the right feel for him. He felt really good. So just it's that human connection that he had right away with that brand, who was doing it a lot differently than all the other brands that he applied for.
Such a good story. It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we talk about connection. It's so important to have those connections. And we talk about retail earlier, like, it is all about creating those connections. So how do you do that at scale though?
Yeah. So this is where technology can really benefit you. So when we go to NRF, you and I are walking around, we're looking at all the shiny objects, we're looking at all the tech. A lot of that will never get implemented in a store. But there are technologies that can help you create connection at scale through things like check-ins. So, maybe I come in for my shift, I clock in online, I get a text message that says, "Hey Ron, like how are you feeling today?" Oh, like I feel okay. Yeah, I'm a flat line smile face from like red to green. I'm in the middle. That's it. Like that's great. Tell me more about how was your shift yesterday? And it's like so there's great technology that keeps you connected to the brand, where at scale, and brands like Amazon, Google are starting to use this, where you can understand how thousands of people in the field are feeling at any given moment. And that's a very powerful way to think about, wow, the majority of our workforce actually gave themselves an orange face on the scale of red to green. They're orange and they're frustrated with their leader. They're frustrated by kind of this process or this safety hazard or all the things. So you're versus waiting for a manager to have a conversation with an employee touch base at scale. That's very hard to do. And
Mhm.
most managers today have a bigger direct report structure than they probably ever had. Most district managers in our business probably have more stores than they've ever had. Same at the regional level. And so then how do you do that? You can use tech to do that instead. And then from there, what do you do with that information? So you have all this data, you can implement new changes at scale based on what you've learned. So I love how this part of like pride at scale really works, because we do think
Love
of
it.
it as being very soft and very single. You and I are having a quarterly touch base. That all sounds great, but there's 90 days of work in between there that I actually don't know how you feel.
Yeah.
And you may not actually tell me the truth. You may tell the truth to an anonymous AI kind of source, but you may not tell me the truth as your boss.
That is so
And
true. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
You definitely you might be a little bit nervous or afraid of what they're going to say back to you. So an employee might not tell you that this process really stinks or I don't like this job because, well, then they might get rid of me. Right. So
right.
telling an
Or I don't like
AI,
you. I don't like your
yeah,
leadership style, or I'm not getting what I need. And it takes experience and confidence to say to your direct supervisor, "I'm not getting what I need from you."
yes, definitely. Yeah.
That doesn't come in your first few years of work. And so how do you then create process where people feel safe and can share how they feel, and you can discover where those opportunities to really optimize the workforce through all the great things that are being built right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Everything I'm hearing so far on is like it's like treating the employee like a customer. Like we have systems in place that take on consumer reviews all the time, and we watch those measures and we track them and see how they do over time. Like it's awesome to be able to do that at scale and be able to do it with your workforce. It's so powerful.
So powerful.
Yeah.
And it's getting better all the time.
Mm-hmm.
It's getting better and it's getting less expensive. And so that's the beauty of this, of there's really no reason not to. You can find new tech that you can implement tomorrow at a very low cost that would help you navigate the change that's happening. And maybe most importantly, how people are feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And because everyone's feeling a lot of things about a lot of different things, and it impacts your work. And you
Absolutely.
can't just ignore that and think that people don't have a lot going on at home, don't have a lot of thoughts about what's happening in the world. They do. And it's your responsibility as a leader not to dig into everything about everything they're feeling, but to be available, but to also understand how you need to lead differently in times of change.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you make them feel supported when they're, in your four walls? It's all about that support. So you might not be able to solve their problem at home or figure out exactly, the political issues that they're facing. But you know what? If you can create that safe space and make them feel supported while they're in your care, that's going to be huge. They're going to want to come there to escape their problems.
Right, right. And
Right.
think, there's a lot of, it doesn't really apply to retail, but all the kind of return to office conversations. I see a lot of data about that. I see a lot of conversations online about that. You may, if you're a younger person that entered the workforce 2020, 2021, being in the office now is a new thing for you. You've never actually
Yeah.
had to do it. And so there's a massive learning curve if you didn't grow up that way. And now all of a sudden I have to come here and do this and be around these people all day. And you may see a shift in your productivity. But for some people, being in an office around people all day is very emotionally draining, where other people love it. Say because I'm a retailer, like being in the office was for me always so much fun. Walking around, hey, what are you doing? What's new? All, that, but that's not how everyone operates.
Yeah.
And so being respectful of maybe they never actually worked in an office. Maybe they don't, their productivity is different at home versus in the office. So there's just work to do. And it's not one size fits all.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think like what you mentioned before too, like with the smiley faces and kind of like looking at those measures of satisfaction by employees, I think that's something that should be in everybody's like playbook when thinking about the employee experience. But like when we think about playbooks and what we're measuring, like what are some of the things that like we're measuring today that are just outdated and we probably should just stop?
Yeah. I think in anything that's not related to, that's kind of tracking pride and tracking engagement and tracking kind of your commitment to work, which are kind of soft skills, like soft data that we may not have always put a lot of thought into. I think anything that's not tracking that is not as valuable. And so I think we track things, of course, all the normal business KPIs, but then we track things like compliance in certain areas. Again, different people work differently, and compliance may not be one size fits all. Safety and things, of course, but there are variables that require you to think differently about someone else's experience. And so I think if we track often turnover, I think that's one that just seems, well, why is the turnover higher? Or we really need to get our turnover down. I hear those,
Mm-hmm.
but they have no idea why the turnover is high.
Yeah.
They have no data behind the fact that 100% of their employees left, except some random exit interviews, again, done by humans that may not always get you the answers that you need.
Yeah. And
So
it's not
I think,
quantitative. So it's like,
right,
yeah.
you have no idea. Oh, they could have been there for a month or they could have been there for 10 years, and you have exit interview data. So these are KPIs that I think need massive evolution, are much more in tune with how people are feeling about work.
Yeah. So I say I take it back, like take it as where we need to start double clicking on some of our metrics and say, okay, well, what are the reasons like for these numbers for being what they are? And now
Right.
that we have technology and more skills to be able to pull out those numbers, we should definitely be thinking about the why behind those, which I think is so important. And when you mentioned compliance, it reminded me of something that I saw in the Delhi experience where compliance numbers were low. Like employees were not showing the first slice and giving them a sample at stores, and that's something that we measured very specifically. Like we wanted to make sure that people were getting samples at the counter. So it looked like employees weren't doing their job and they just didn't care. But after doing some ethnographic research with employees and actually spending time in stores with them, we learned very quickly that the reason why they weren't giving the sample was because that it wasn't of value to the consumer. They wanted to get out of the deli faster, and the
Mhm.
employers were self-selecting not to give them that sample when they felt like they were just in a rush. So employees knew they
Mhm.
were getting like dinged for compliance, but they didn't care because their job was taking care of the customer, and they wanted to make sure they got them out of there happy. So it's just like, why are we measuring the things that are under compliance, and are those really the right compliance measurements that we're looking at?
So true. And
Yeah.
and some of that, Matt, is so directly linked to pride. And I overuse this word, but I do it with intention. Things like time and attendance are rooted in pride. If I'm really proud of where I work, I show up on time. If I'm proud of what I do, I show up on time. If I'm proud of how I engage with my customers, I'm going to find ways to do it that's right for that customer at that time, which is exactly what you're describing. You've hired really smart people that can choose what they need to do based on how that customer is feeling at that time.
Yeah.
It's again going back to where this started. It's not one size fits all. Compliance is one size fits all. No matter what, this is what you do, and it doesn't work for the customer, and it doesn't work for employees.
Yeah, absolutely. So like when you do talk about like human pride, you said it's like it's the competitive advantage, right?
Yeah,
What like shows up? How does that mindset show up in high performing retail brands today?
I think part of that pride, like optimizing your team, optimize and your customers, I would say, fall into this is what do you really stand for? Who are you? What value do you add to the customer and employee experience? Where do you sit in the ecosystem of retail? And so there are some incredible brands doing really interesting work in every different product category. Discover who those are. So I also think it's being a constant student of the industry and saying, well, who's doing it well? Why does it feel like they're doing it well? What are their results? And how can we continue to think about optimizing our own business to learn from everyone else? And again, I think often our industry is very like heads down. This is how we do it. This is how we've always done it. This worked since the 70s and we're not going to change it. And meanwhile, everyone else is rushing by you. And, I'm going to reference like we're going through this evolution in department stores, this kind of, oh, woe is me, the business is struggling. Well, that's an example of brands that were heads down, didn't pay any attention to how the world was changing, how the customer was shopping differently, how specialty has evolved all around them. And now they're like, oh boy, what do we do now? And so I do think that there's this awareness that's needed to
Yeah.
really think about human potential, think about the business, think about optimizing everything around you. And that may mean you change something dramatically. It's kind of what your business is built on. You have to continue to evolve. You have to continue to think differently about business and about people, or you won't be around
Yeah.
anymore. And that's just the reality of how fast the business operates today.
Yeah, you put your head down and you just kind of do the work, and all of a sudden when you lift your head up, it's like everything is just different around you. And if you can't afford to ignore it for any time. What are the things that you can do right now? And I love like the thinking about like who around me is doing it well, and learning from that, being inspired by that, because there are really good brands out there that are putting the investment in and evolving their stores, evolving their work staff. So what are they doing right, and how might we be able to just apply a little bit of that to our business? So
Yeah,
important.
exactly.
Yeah. So I think the last question I would like to ask you, Ron, like, thinking about like just leadership traits, because I think this is heavily put on leaders, like human pride, evolving our stores. It's about the leaders and the things that they're doing. Like, in your experience, like, what are some of like the leadership traits that you're seeing that define some of the most successful retail executives out there? And what is going to be needed in the next 5 years from
Sure. So I think number one is curiosity. Curiosity, everyone speaks about, it's a word everyone uses, but I rarely see it in authentic action from leaders. I think that there still is this, what you know what worked. This is what has delivered great results. Instead of saying, forget our own business, let's be highly curious about not only our industry, but other industries. What can we learn from the hotel business? What can we learn from the restaurant business? What can we learn even within, you say, contemporary versus luxury versus off price versus big box? We all run different kinds of businesses. And you may think how they operate doesn't apply to you, but the reality is there's a lot that applies. Mm-hmm. And you and I have the luxury of being able to engage in all kinds of different business models. And their similarities are more striking than their differences when it comes to leadership. And so I do think that level of curiosity is one that will differentiate great leaders from others in the future. And I would also apply that to technology. I still see leaders coming to me and say, well, I don't really understand ChatGPT yet. I'm like, we've moved past that. If that's where you are, you're already late. So like find ways to continue to learn, to grow. That's why I love these trade shows. You get to see all the best in technology. You may not ever use it, but you should know what's going on. There's a new technology that I'm engaging with and learning about that's a listening device for employees. And that's really never been done at scale, of like listening to your shifts and then providing feedback for you on your selling skills based on how it's listening to you engage with people all week, creating almost like a weekly summary of these are things you did really well. These are your opportunities. Here's some coaching that could go with it. Here's how your supervisor could help you. So, learning say, well, how do we continue to provide feedback at scale? Here's just new technology being developed. So that technology curiosity applies to business. It applies to people learning what they want. It applies to other industries. For me, it just never stops. And that's what great leaders do. You're not afraid to take what works for someone else.
Yeah, I think we can't turn a blind eye to technology and what it's doing. It's just, it can be such a helpful part of our business, and I know a lot of leaders are just like, just staying away from it. So I love that, and of course the curiosity is so important. It's something I talk about all the time with innovation. Like, you have to be curious, but I like what you said after curiosity. It's the authentic action that comes after that curiosity, which is so powerful when you're able to be curious, get that new nugget of insight and then take action on it. I think that is such the key.
Right. And it's, from my point of view, it's not even an option today. If you sit and say, this is the way we've always done it, then technology will pass you by and your workforce will pass you. And then you're going to be stuck left in the dirt. And there's just no other soft way to put that, is if you aren't, it will be at your detriment.
Yes.
And that's sometimes hard to hear. And it can also be a new skill. Being curious for some people is natural. For some people, it's a learned skill to do it authentically. I've been around leaders who pretended that they were curious, but they really weren't. I think someone had told them they need to be more curious. And so they pretended to ask questions or pretended to listen. That's not, so if you don't have it, develop the skill so that it's a natural tendency for you.
Yeah. Any advice on how to develop that skill?
Be around other people who have it. Watch them in action, and do less talking and more listening too.
Love it, Ron.
Which is hard to do as a leader sometimes.
It is.
Yes.
It's definitely a learned skill for sure, but so powerful once you get it.
Yeah. I think so. I think so too. And when people see that shift in you, I've coached people to say, I don't want to hear you speak for the next 2 hours. And you're just going to listen, maybe take notes, and then I'm going to ask you what you heard without commenting after. That's really hard for people to do. But it's, I love to challenge people that way and to think, how can listening and just being curious change your leadership? They always come out the other side of that activity changed.
That's a very interesting activity. I would love for everyone listening to this to do that activity and let us know how it goes. That'd be really interesting. I'm definitely going to try that out with my wife today. Ron, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Some really amazing insights. Best-selling book, Human Pride. Pick it up today. If you haven't gotten Retail Pride, pick up that one as well. Both really good reads that you will not regret having. Any leader, any industry, these are the books that you need to get. Ron, anything else you want to leave the audience with before we end?
No, thank you. Thank you, Matt. It's a pleasure to do this with you and to watch your journey, and have either one of us on anyone's stage would be a joy to do that.
Absolutely.
We're both in that business and would welcome those opportunities.
Yes, and if you want to have us both, that would be even better.
That would be fun.
We'd love
too.
to have a collaboration.
It's true. Really
thank
true.
you so much for being on the show today, and everything. All the links will be in the show notes, so make sure you capture all those and get that book.
Great. Thank you, Matt.
We have made it to the end of another episode. Thank you for tuning in. A couple of things before you go. If you have found value in this episode, I am sure you'll find value in what we have coming up. So please subscribe so you will have access and know when we launch the next episode. Also, leave a review. The more reviews we have, the further our reach becomes, and I truly want this to be heard by as many leaders as possible. Don't hog this all for yourself. I would love to hear your insights on this topic, so meet me on social media at Matt Mueller Innovation on LinkedIn and Instagram. And lastly, if you want to learn more about my story and what I can do for you and your company, go to themindfulinnovator.com. I would love to help you innovate on purpose. Until next time, just remember, bring a level of awareness to each conversation, each observation, each moment, and you can create great change in this world. Thank you.